every song that's arranged well usually has moments where it's building to something and then a moment where it's supposed to be as big as it can go. A lot of times these are the choruses, but call it whatever you want. Don't get hung up on the names of what the part is. It could be the bridge, or it could be a post chorus, or it could be, people call it the turnaround, or, the hook riff, whatever you got that you want to be the biggest part of the song. Consider what that is before you start. Then go to that part of the song and start getting your balance there, not only with faders and panning, but with EQ and compression. Specifically, when you're working with compression, you want the compressor to be working as hard as you want it to work in those moments, but not so hard where it feels like you're going backwards. That's the problem. When people start at the top and they dial in their compression settings, a lot of times everything's less dense. So I'm thinking about this on the mix bus. Like when you think about how you dial in your mix bus to start mixing into it, it helps to start at the loudest part, but it's not only on the mix bus. Maybe on the tracks themselves. If the players are playing dynamically, you got a vocalist who's kind of easing into the song, and then the chorus comes and they're much louder. If you dial in the early parts of the song so that it's the right amount of compression where you can't really hear it, but it's giving you the lift you want and the flavor you want, now it gets to the loudest part of the song, and it will feel like it's going backwards. It will get smaller and it will get tighter instead of sounding big and open and beautiful. So by dialing in the stuff when everybody's dynamically at their loudest, it makes a big difference. But picking this moment, that's always up for debate, where you want to pick what the loudest moment is to you. You could listen to a rough mix to figure it out, or you could, if you don't have a good rough mix, just listen to it and see where you start dancing the most. Where you start grooving the most is usually the part of the song that's the most intense and needs the thing. When I say the thing, that's where you'll dial in your stuff so that it builds to that. That's the top of the mountain. Then going backwards, you take things away, and it's super easy to look at it that way. Sometimes you have to work with the arrangement a little bit, depending on where the artist is who sends you stuff and what they're really looking for. You may be like, okay, this would be great, but it doesn't go anywhere, this song. The biggest part sounds just like the beginning. So as a result, let's take things out as we come down the mountain towards the top of the song. And then once it gets to this part, it will sound way bigger. Also, you're playing with panning, you're playing with filters, all that. Now, here's another great tip that Michael Brower does that I like a lot. He pays attention to how he's moving when he's listening to the song. Seems like a little thing, but you'll find if you pay attention to how you groove while you're listening to the song, you'll decide where to appropriately put emphasis when you're mixing. In other words, are you grooving on the 4 on the floor groove, or are you grooving on the upbeat? Like, what is it about the song? How are you moving? If you're moving with the upbeat, then you may realize that when you're putting your mix together, focusing on the instruments that are creating that upbeat excitement, make those a little bit louder maybe than the other instruments that are pushing on the downbeat. And then all of a sudden, now that feel of how you were grooving gets accentuated. And this is, in my opinion, a real big tell, because some people, they don't feel the groove. But if you can start by where does this song have a groove, and you almost force yourself to get into it, to feel what you're supposed to feel when you hear this, that will dictate what you do. I mean, that gives you a guide more of what to do than to just start from the top and EQ the kick drum snare. I mean, if you're over here watching this channel long enough, I never do that. I start with everything in, and if I have to, I'll solo things to hear certain spots, but I'm mixing with everything in all the time. More often than not, I'll mute things out in groups to work on other things rather than solo things. Unless you're trying to dive into a specific thing and surgically do something or whatever, that's different. But I'm talking about the majority of the song. You got to feel what you should be doing, not look with your eyes at what you should be doing, or, just sort of do what you always do. Feel what you should be doing. So how are you grooving? How are you dancing? Emphasize that. And this also involves figuring out what's doing it. So sometimes you may have to solo things just to figure that out. Be like, it's the guitars and the synthesizer. No, not the synthesizer, it's the piano doing it. Oh, it's the violin thing. Oh, it's this weird, Congo line. I mean, it could be anything that's doing something to the groove. And that's why you get different feels when people mix stuff. and it will never be the same twice, no matter who is doing it, because everyone sort of does that naturally. But some people do it on autopilot without first assessing what they should be pushing on. Like some people always emphasize the the one beat and the three, for example, no matter what. They're always going to emphasize boom, they ignore the second, and then their big kicks and stuff, the snare is like an afterthought. Whereas some people are emphasizing the two and the four all the time. I'm saying pick your moments. It will drastically change everything. It'll also change how you adjust compressor settings, because your release, I would say your release is like the number one dial in groove control. Because if your release is working very fast, it will give you a certain type of feel. And if it slows down, if you slow the release down, you'll notice the song breathe in a completely different way. So where you want that to be is largely dependent on where the groove is, on how it feels when you're listening to it, and where you want to put it, as opposed to the other idea of just setting it as aggressive as you can, which some people do. But I find it better to use release as a groove tool. And, attack is also part of that groove tool as well. Don't always look at attack like the way to just chop a transient down to prevent clipping or overloading. Don't look at it that way. Adjust attack and release on everything you do. And then one day, if you don't hear what the attack and release are doing to the groove, you will hear it one day, I promise. But you got to work with it, and always start at the most extreme settings and then go backwards from there. That's kind of how, the same way I look at like when I'm dialing in faders. I like to start where they're extreme all the way down. Then, like when you're trying to figure out where things should sit, it often helps start from nothing. Then you pull it up till you hear it. And then as soon as you overshoot it a little bit, it'll become obvious. So you got to tuck it back in from there. That's a way better way to work than just sort of inching along, I find. I start with the extremes all the way down, then I'm pulling it up a little bit, then I'm backing it off a little bit. I feel like that's the way to go. And that's actually kind of an old school method. Guys back in the day, if you would want like a bass a little louder, they would have to get a whole new balance, because a lot of guys worked like that. They'd pull everything down, rebalance what he was doing to make sense with the idea of bass a little louder, as opposed to just, touching up the bass a little. It's never really, in my opinion, it's like you build a mix. It's like a house, and it's like a house of cards. So if you wind up pushing things a little here, a little there, it's never the same balance. So you could go at it thinking different. Like, I want the song to feature more bass because it does something to the groove. And then you should mix it with that in mind. That's sort of my way of looking at it. But I know I'm not alone on this. So I'm curious how you guys look at it. Maybe you look at it differently. That's all good too. Leave a comment. Evan Jaffe, Custom Cut Studios. Subscribe. I'd really appreciate that. You guys got this. Take it easy.